Guruji, my query to you is, those who come to you have their own queries. Would you like to tell us that how do they feel about themselves when they are in this situation?
The question you have put to me is very important one. Those who come to me are inquisitive about the spiritual as well as today's materialistic affairs. Everybody is deeply engulfed in their own limited sphere of their problems and wants to get rid of them. These problems may relate to mind, body, and spirit. Everybody wants deliverance from pain and from sorrow. That is why different kind of people always come to me and seek their answers. And by the grace of Divine Mother and Param Pujya Babaji, whatever compassion and piety is flowing inside me, I try to transfer the same to the person who has some queries. Shaktipat or transfer of the divine energy can be done through word, sight, and even philosophy. Its aim is the welfare of the entire world. It is immaterial as to who is doing the Shaktipat and upon whom it is being done. The giver as well as the taker is God Himself here. We have Tantra Parampara in Bharatvarsh and ancient tradition. In this tradition, Shaiv Tantra is the special one. Questions are put to Bhagwan Shiva, and the inquisitor is Mata Parvati, herself an embodiment of knowledge and divine energy, without whom Shiva is incomplete. In spite of this, for our welfare, feigning ignorance, she asked the questions from her supremely knowledgeable and ever blissful Supreme Lord, who is her husband too. The answers are sought for the welfare of humanity. This process of question and answers or no answers is a unique process which enhances the knowledge and creates the knowledge, and that leads to a blissful life. Embedded in this very knowledge, everyone can lead to a happier, joyful and blissful life. This parampara has been practiced everywhere, be any religion, any community or any tradition of the world. An unhappy person seeks salvation from sorrow. The internal bliss which lies within, self-awakening, everyone is in search of that. And this search is what we call life.
Guruji, I want to ask whether those who come to you want salvation from sorrow or attainment of eternal bliss. If they want salvation from sorrow, then in the first instance, why does a man come to sorrow?
All those who come to meet saints or Mahatmas have one ultimate goal in their minds. They want to attain bliss or Anand, which is the human nature. Man has forgotten his true self and degraded into lower realms of existence. That is why he yearns to regain his lost natural dignity and seeks the company of knowledgeable and self-realized Mahatmas for solving the problems of his life and helping him in getting deliverance and freeing himself from all sort of sorrows of his world, because he himself is blissful by nature and wants to attain only that Anand. So when he gets this Anand, his sorrows stand dissolved.
What is the definition of sorrow?
Joy and sorrow are the concepts of human mind. These are quite relative in nature. Each individual could have his own sorrow, could have his own perspective, and also his own definition of joy.
It means if one gets rid of one's concepts and perspectives, then there will be no sorrow.
Absolutely not. Because it is how you look at the things, how you perceive them and get them.
How can a man be free from his resolutions and concepts?
Anand or eternal bliss is our true nature. When we are in that state, we are free from all our perceptions and free from all sort of ideologies, free from all sort of concepts. And this is when we are in our real self and in real bliss.
Guruji, in practical life it is said that you should have some resolution and a way of life and work towards its achievement. But Guruji, I would like to ask, if somebody has not set goals in life, how can one live?
Imagination of behavior is relative in nature. It is individual specific, and this entire world is individual specific. And this individual relativity in totality is what we call world, the universe. If we observe, every individual is free from sorrow, is free from joy. But when he behaves with his mind, knowledge, consciousness and his ego, which is his own perception and own resolution, and in result what we experience through our own resources, we find fault in it, or any expectation which go unfulfilled, make us happy or sad.
Does the fulfillment of desires or expectations depend on the past karmas of the individual or his own efforts?
Say being ignorant in respect of one's own potential and not being able to know as to how much should one expect from oneself and others, the individual turns to grief.
Guruji, what do you think about your life?
I try to live a life full of bliss. When I realize that I have to attain my true self, which is eternally blissful, and to achieve that state of being with my resolutions, my conceptions, and my ideologies, I contemplated and practiced and finally achieved this state. Then I realized that I cannot live without this anymore, for some time and for few moments. Having stayed in this state of unoccupied mind and experiencing this, I finally realized that this was my own nature, and failing to live with this nature, I always remained in grief. But now I recognize my nature, so I don't feel any grief or sadness.
Normally, a patient goes to a doctor for getting treatment for his physical ailments. Now, a student seeks the company of a teacher for attaining knowledge. I feel those who come to you want both the worldly as well as spiritual upliftment. Now, Guruji, what I would like to ask is, what do you have to say about this?
Depends what exactly you want to know from me, because many people come to me. Sadhak as well as worldly people come to me. Worldly people come to me to get rid of their world, and sadhaks also come. They too are looking for ways to get rid of their world. So both of them want deliverance from their bondage.
How would you describe a sadhak?
The world of a sadhak comprises of mind, intelligence and thoughts. And in the world of ordinary people, mind, intelligence and thoughts are not considered independently. So only the world that is visible is their world. The sadhak's world is born out of his deepest experiences and their values and their resources. The meaning of the world is one that keeps moving on, or one that keeps changing itself. At both the places, there are people who are drifting and shifting. These are the ones who visit to Sant and Mahapurush because they are scared of drifting away. They don't really want to shift. which means they really want to get rid of this world. Though the world and they themselves are not a different entity, but their concepts and their thoughts are as such. They are one thing and the world something else. The means by which the world is being seen by them. They have their own resources. Mana, Buddhi, Chitta, Ahankar. And using all these resources, when he sees this world, then the more cultivated these resources of seeing the world are, the more cultivated he will experience the world. In Maharashtra, we have a great saint. He says, Hariha apanachi jag jhala. What he says? Hariha apanachi jag jhala. This means, when the entire world is God itself, then what can be accepted and what can be rejected? Thus, we cannot accept God because the entire world is God itself. We can't even reject Him because it cannot be rejected. This whole world is God incarnate.
Guruji, please tell us, what is God?
That which is eternal bliss. That which is complete truth itself. One who knows himself. And one who knows all the creations made by him. Such a supreme being can be called Almighty God. Different cultures and religions have tried to explain him differently. For some he is beyond quality and form, for some he is not. Some worship him with all his qualities in the form of an idol, while others meditate upon his formless shape. They say, the God is one. And there are Christians also, who raise their hands above and say, He is the only one, we all are His sons. All these different concepts we have. These concepts have nothing to do with that Supreme Being. And when you are devoid of all these concepts and thoughts, you become one with that Supreme Being. Then no one is a sayer and no one is a listener.
What is God for an atheist?
How do you define an atheist? If a person negates himself, can be called an atheist? But the fact is that there is no such person who says no to himself in this world. Then how can he be an atheist?
How is it different from proclaiming yourself and searching God in some other self?
See, to establish the presence of a divine power, a witness is required to establish its presence. If there is no witness, the divine power cannot be established. Have you ever heard that God has an email ID, identity card or PAN number, or he has an election identity card or any ration card? He does not have any of these. But we have to keep all these things because we are concerned about our existence and we have to establish our identity. God has no need to establish his existence. He is self-existent. Therefore, he doesn't need to prove that he exists. He is not at all bothered to prove his existence.
Guruji, if you have to define yourself, how will you explain that?
I cannot explain myself because my existence is not limited. I am in communion with that Supreme Self. So even calling myself an individual would not be right. When I see myself, I feel one with that Supreme Self. I feel myself as infinite. And when I get associated to myself and then relate to something, then I put myself as a person, I become a personality, and a relation is established.
Guruji, what is your God for you?
Once you become one with the Supreme Self, this experience cannot be explained. When a doll of salt went to measure the depth of sea, she never returned back to tell how deep it was. Likewise, what we experience is only our experience, which can only be experienced by self. It cannot be expressed. And whomsoever have tried to tell this, practice this, and the saints who have tried to tell this, they have said this only symbolically. No one can ever explain the divine truth perfectly in words because it's beyond words.
We have heard that God is manifest as well as unmanifest.
Absolutely, you are right. He is both unmanifest as well as manifest.
How can you call him a manifest?
He is manifest in you, at the same time unmanifest in you. You can never exhibit your mind. You can never exhibit your intellect. You can never exhibit your enlightened self, but you can experience it. So the mind and intellect, and consciousness and ego, with the help of these you get expressed. You are existent. However, you cannot exhibit any of these things. Likewise, God is manifest as well as unmanifest. Same way, you too are manifest and unmanifest. Because you are visible through your color and form. For example, your wife accepts you as her husband and your son accepts you as his father. And also your father accepts you as his son. But whenever you are in a deep sleep, you negate these relations and you don't even know if they really exist.
Guruji, how do you define the functional development of an individual?
An individual, when after getting a body thinks himself only as a body, then the process of his development has not yet begun, it's about to begin. If he considers his own body to be an enlightened one, to be a blissful one, then he has achieved some level of development. He has reached some level of development. And one who thinks himself as blissful and thinks he is timeless, cosmic, macrocosmic and transcosmic he is, he doesn't need any platform to express himself. His sheer presence is enough. An unmarried girl can easily write a thesis on motherhood, can even get a PhD, but she doesn't have any experience at all. But a mother would simply stand up and say she is a mother, and this will be sufficient for her because she has experience. And the unmarried girl just has a theory.
Guruji, I would want to know in what way you wish the individual to develop.
Individual should understand himself. Individual should experience himself. He should be steady within himself. Should try to know his true identity. Should attain his blissful nature. Know that. This is the pinnacle of human development.
And what formula have you designed for this?
There is no formula for this. No one has designed any. Whatever scriptures we have, like we have Upanishad, we have Aranyak, we have Veda, or different spiritual leaders of different religions or knowledgeable great people have not compiled in scripture as such. No such formula has been devised. Because it is beyond the ambit of formulas. Formulas can only work with visible matters. It doesn't work with invisible things.
It works on manifest things. How do we understand it?
If somebody abuses you in your language, then what would be your reaction to that? Won't you get affected by it? Won't you experience it?
Abuse is manifest, isn't it?
But its consequence is invisible.
But the effect has been registered on mind, intellect, consciousness and ego.
Of course, the effect is there. That is why there is a reaction. Had there been no effect, there would have been no reaction. If you abuse a stone, what difference would it make? What would be the reaction? By the medium of mind, intellect, consciousness and ego, one is reacting to that abuse. His self-existence is making him react to that abuse. He considers himself as existent. And this existence has been dishonored. This has been insulted. So he has become very angry. And the reaction of this anger is what you experience here visibly.
But it's a natural process, don't you think so?
How many meanings of a word could be in your opinion? Should you give any thought to them or not? Now you tell me. If you abuse a Tamil in Marathi, what does it matter to him? Or a Tamilian abused a Marathi in Tamil, did it make any difference? Since you know the meaning of the word, so you get angry. He doesn't know the meaning of the word, so it makes no difference to him. If you are a scholar and somebody knows you well in the city which you live in, he knows you only as a scholar, and how you behave, he is not really aware of that. What are you wearing, he doesn't care. Your identity is your knowledge. Therefore, wherever this scholar goes, he won't introduce himself. People will try to find out who he really is. You too are trying to discover God, but he is not bothered about this at all. To know what you are thinking of. Of course, you are bothered about what others are thinking of and what are their reactions. That always catches your interest. When a meeting takes place, then after the meeting is over, you call a person to know what really happened in that meeting. How did they find your presentation? You want to know how your presentation was. How the meeting was means not tea and coffee. Everyone knows about this. This is quite a normal thing. This doesn't make any difference. But what reaction did your presentation really evoke? This is what you want to know. But the peon who is sitting outside that meeting hall, why will he bother about this? There are so many meetings taking place there every day, and he is not really involved in any of such meetings directly. So in that case, his actions or reactions don't mean anything.
Let us slightly revert to the topic where you said that there is no set formula and that things have been designed and interpreted in different ways in the Holy Scriptures.
See, actually development has its own process. For example, we get our kids admitted in nursery school or in KG school. We have set a formula, means we have set it. That a kid is of this age, he is 1.5 years old and he can understand these things only. And by taking these things into consideration, you have set a training pattern. And only to those students who can withstand this training pattern, you give them admission. You let them in. One who cannot withstand this, you say he is not eligible. Sir Albert Einstein commands a very interesting story. His mother took him to admit him in nursery. So when the mother and son reached the school, then the kid Einstein was interviewed there. After the interview was over, the kid was asked to sit outside. Then mother was called. She was also interviewed. The mother wished to know the result, whether her kid passed the interview and got the admission. Then that mother was told, no, excuse us, we cannot admit your kid in our school. They said, we have never ever seen such a stupid kid like this before. And a stupid kid like this, we cannot give admission. And this kid won the Nobel Prize later in his life. How can a person assess or measure somebody's thought and intellect? Because when we are not aware of our own intellect, how can we read others' mind?
But in practical life, there should be a system, a process through which a student should be admitted.
That's right, you have a procedure. What is the result of that procedure? Take today's educational institutions. If you see, these are just like brick kilns. Bricks are being manufactured, bricks are coming out.
But many people are successful and they are doing good for themselves.
No, those people who you are praising this much so lavishly, those people are not really the product of your approved system. Whatever talent they have, they are the result of that very talent.
The way in which Einstein was rejected, such people are one in thousands, those who are inherently brilliant. Otherwise, for all other people, there is a system and process.
That's true. Whatever be your talent, whatever be your system, whatever procedure you maintain to find out something, it has its own limitations. There are people who are beyond these limitations. Sant Kabir never went to any university for his studies, but he is being studied in all the universities. People are writing theses, they are doing PhD on him. Take Sant Chokha Mela, he never ever visited any university or school. But a chair, a fellowship is being established in his name. Sant Namdev never went to any school. But there is a seat of learning in his name. And the studies and research is being conducted there.
Lakhs are born out of which one or two become saints. Similarly, genius is also one amongst lakhs who is practically successful. Everyone is not a saint.
You are absolutely right, everyone is not a saint, but I'm sorry to say that everyone is a saint, but he does not know that.
In what way are you trying to let us know that all are saints?
I don't try to do such thing. I just say, know yourself, understand yourself. Always try to discover your identity. My Gurudev always used to say, Aapko dhyao, aapko pujo, aapko vando. You should always respect yourself. And your God is within you, He is inside you, just experience Him.
Individuals make a society, and the society makes a nation. But what does a saint think about the individual development, social development, and national development? We want to know this from you.
A devotee, by the medium of meditation, gets to know his identity. In that identity, not only the self-identity, but he also gets to know the world in which he is living. In this situation, the process of learning starts from the individual and it ends at a point where his world ends. So at present, all the religions and all the cults we have, they all had their own visionaries and their experiences were same. And those experiences which they experienced in themselves, the reaction of that is world progress. This is why all saints and great people, scholars, pay more attention to the development of mankind. To them, the welfare of nation lies within the development of individual. Welfare of society lies within the welfare of individual. If individual, mentally, intellectually, and also emotionally, as well as physically, financially, and more important, sacramentally, if he is well developed, then you can call the society a prosperous one. And the culture of this prosperous society is considered as a prosperous culture. It has a very deep impact on the world. Therefore, all the ancient culture we have today, the great people and the visionaries of all those culture, they were more concerned about the development of individual. And this is the ultimate concept. So all the saints and all great people who have established new religion or re-established the ancient ones, although the fact is that no one has established any religion. A person expressed his experience, and after some time what his followers did, they with a specific name put this process in front of the entire world and said this is religion. Thus Buddhism, Jainism, Christianity, Islam, Hinduism, all these different kind of beliefs were established in this world.
Let us come to the individual development. Now, it is apparent that all these religions have created contradictory ways of thinking, and religion itself has become a stumbling block in the development of the individual. This is how the things are today.
It is not the situation. It depends upon the convictions and capability to sustain this conviction. You might have seen a kid in nursery school and, studying in some institution. His curriculum is not designed for a degree or any post-degree studies. The capability of that kid, intellectual, emotional and physical, And keeping these capabilities in mind and capability of expressing them, in accordance with this, he is given a sort of a common educational exercise. That is why a class or a group of 50 students in that class, each student has a different level of intelligence. Expression capability is different. Some students are good in arts, someone is in math, someone is in science. Some are good in language, some are good in analyzing a person. Therefore, when 50 children take exam in the same subject, and when the result comes, their order of merit is not the same, it's always different. We compile some 10 subjects and what percentage that student has scored, marks he has scored. And after this, we assess and then we ascertain that this kid or student has passed this test with these marks. And we have often experienced this, that those students who score first in their school or in their universities, they are miserably very far behind, especially in their personal lives. They even lose their identities later on in life. And you must have seen such persons also, who are not perhaps educated or do not have any formal educational qualifications. And these fellows are world famous. I do not say that the educational system is wrong or the direction of this system is wrong. The educational system should be designed in such a way that it should be helpful to the person in developing his personality. It should not curb his development.
Guruji, tell us, have the saints designed any such system or any kind of process for an individual's development?
Keeping the individual in the very center, how the development of an individual takes place, saints have experienced it with self-practice. When an individual starts practicing this, then what is mind, what is intellect, what is consciousness, ego, that is medium of expression, what is that? What is body? He analyzes and researches all these things. Then his reaction, in his perspective, he evaluates and analyzes himself and gets deeper and further in his practices by the grace of God. And gradually he develops himself as a whole. And in this state of completeness, he recognizes himself. When he knows himself and his real identity, he feels that there is nothing more to know. And there his practices ends up and he starts living with simplicity in Saral Avastha.
Is it really felt that there is nothing to know?
If you want to know the science, then there is an endless chain of things to uncover. But if you want to know at the level of individual, then there is nothing to know. After knowing the self, nothing remains to know actually.
Guruji, can we really know ourselves completely?
You can definitely know. This is the self-experience of the saints who knew themselves very well.
What is the meaning of religion for an individual?
See, it is a discipline which really establishes religion. Definition of dharma is dhareti dharma, which can be held is dharma.
What is held by religion?
Religion holds self-knowledge, it holds illuminated self, it also holds bliss, and the whole system that is put together is called religion. It cannot be seen, but its results are visible. Religion is not a threshold, it's not a building, it's not a structure, it's not an individual.
What is religion for a saint?
Art of living effortlessly is religion.
What is the difference between spirituality and religion?
Religion is ever present and spirituality is relative in respect of time.
Time is relative vis-a-vis individual?
See, time is relative only for that individual. who experiences its relativity through time itself. Those who have transcended it, the time is not relative for them. One whose existence is timeless and he knows himself that he is timeless, the time has nothing to do in such case. All the self-realized great men live in immutable present, and this present has got no past and no future. Past and future are always seen in relation to present and spiritually being. The art of living, every spiritually oriented person, while he is living in perpetual present, is living in timelessness. That is why he is timeless.
In what way the spirituality is an art of living?
I already have told you to understand yourself in a effortless and normal way and live through it and experience and feel your own bliss. This is the process and art of living.
Guruji, will you please make us understand that what is this effortless way of living?
See, a child is born in every family and his development starts soon after in a very normal way. The expressions of the child is very natural and very effortless. Those expressions are very innocent. And when the innocence of this child is broken, we start saying that the child is growing up. This means he is now losing his naturalness.
But a small child also feels angry.
But his anger is not long lasting.
But if we express such anger, will it be acceptable to the world out there?
Almost every saint and great man feel angry, but their anger is temporary and it does not have any result. It does not have any effect on them, but the impact of this, the result of this is good for society.
So this means if the result of our anger does not affect us and carries the point to the other person, then the anger is good.
It is very good in proper measure, because it is necessary to instill fear in order to discipline somebody. Today everyone is scared, and this is happening because of the lack of knowledge about themselves. You try to scare small kids with dark by telling them different kind of stories. And when he grows up, goes there and finds nothing, he is no more scared with any of your stories. To acquire knowledge is destroying ignorance. Where there was darkness some time back, as soon as the lamp is lit, the light is spread.
What is knowledge, Guruji?
Knowing oneself is knowledge.
Who is the knower of the self?
You yourself are the knower of self.
Then what am I?
The enlightened self.
But the enlightened self does not register anything.
It is the medium of so many registrations. Your mind registers through its medium, your intellect registers through its medium, your consciousness registers through its medium, everything.
Then who acquired this awareness? Me? I mean, my own enlightened self?
Look, you yourself are awareness personified. Awareness is not anything special for you.
Why do I feel that I am not awareness personified?
It is not you, but your intellect that feels like this. It is anxious to know this.
Guruji, is it bad to crave about knowing?
To know is not a bad thing, but to express curiosity about the outcome of knowing, negatively or positively, is the main thing, and we call it sansar or the world.
What do you mean by curiosity?
To know the result, it's good or bad. If you have any specific vested interest in something, then whether its outcome is in favor of you or against, this is all what you try to know.
Is it not selfishness to know oneself?
To know yourself is not selfishness, because that is your true nature. This is not selfishness. See, in all the 24 hours, an individual sleeps for 8 hours. and keeps awake for about 16 hours. During that 16 hours of wakefulness, you will observe that he spends 15 hours trying to know about others. Whatever is not associated with him, like people, things, and the world, he tries to know that only, and is not trying to know himself. And the result of trying to know other than yourself is nothing but a cause of grief. You will just suffer and nothing else.
Much more than knowing about one's own self is required to lead a worldly life. The individual tries to do that. Guruji, tell us, is it bad?
Knowing is not bad. Playing with the consequences is bad.
Why are there consequences?
Consequence is the result of your intellectual maneuvering. This is what ignites the process.
What is intellectual maneuvering?
If the outcome is in your favor, you become very active for it. If the outcome is not in your favor, then you try your best to remove that outcome.
Who decides whether the outcome is in your favor or against you?
It's your mind, your intellect decides whether it is in your favor or against you. If your mind, intellect, and conscious is infected by base qualities, then the outcome is obvious and you will try to get rid of it.
Who drives the mind and intellect?
Your ego is the driving force behind these.
And who drives the ego?
Ego is your existence. You have fixed a goal for yourself, and to achieve this goal, you use this as a resource to achieve it.
Who is the maker of my existence?
You yourself are the maker of your existence, your ego, your intellect, and your consciousness.
Sai Baba stresses on Shraddha and Saburi, that is, faith and patience. Whether these are two different concepts or they are one and the same. Please tell us, Guruji.
Sai Baba says that in Shraddha and Saburi, which are the two cardinal principles of his life, in these aspects only, the entire internal and external knowledge of his is contained. Faith is a matter of heart, it's a matter of mind, and it's a matter of conscience. Intellect is always entangled into ifs and buts. As long as its ifs and buts are not over, intellect does not completely surrender. And until this intellect surrenders, complete surrender does not take place. And without this complete surrender, complete faith will never ever take place. Those who have faith are bound to be patient. Those who lack this faith, they are bound to lack patience also. Where there is faith, there is surrender. Where is surrender, there is wait and not impatience. A man with a faith always believes in patience. He believes in waiting patiently because his faith is born in him by itself. And this faith of his is his God. That is why he is bound to be patient.
Is it necessary to be adequately doubtful?
Being adequately doubtful is necessary because if you are a knowledge seeker and if you have sufficient doubts, these will lead you to knowledge. The chain of your evolution lies in the medium of deliverance. Faith is invisible and intellect is less required there. This is why devotees have heart and knowledge seekers have intellect. And scholars, by means of their developed intellect, they recognize themselves, they realize themselves, and also that supreme power. Pinnacle of knowledge converts into devotion, and pinnacle of devotion converts into knowledge. Where there is devotion, there is patience. And where there is patience, there is wait. There is wait for knowledge, and this is self-knowledge.
Countless number of thoughts within us create doubts, and these doubts carry us away from faith. Thoughts just do not end. Doubts do not end. Faith finds no substratum, and in the absence of that, surrender is not possible. In the path of meditation, surrender has been referred to as a big ingredient. What would you like to say about this?
Those linked with the initiation of Shaktipat or are linked with Shaktipat tradition, surrender to them is not a new art of learning. Shaktipat itself means compassion without any specific cause. When it is ordained by the preceptor in the disciple, and when in the disciple purification of 72,000 nerves begin. For this process there are pranayam, asanas and other practices, the impressions on the conscience of our previous birth. And during this purification of the previous birth, we experience the voices of different animals and also different other noises. As a devotee, we keep on experiencing this. The devotee becomes active and action-oriented, and entire activities start working. And these activities, when are at work, our mind and intellect, they are not quiet but keep on researching over this entire thing. The observation goes on, the exploration goes on. And with this, they start experiencing that this is out of our control, that we are unable to control this. And from that moment, the process of surrender begins. Mind and intellect, slowly, towards that supreme power, become more dedicated and more surrendering as well. When you get something with lots of efforts, and the efforts you are making, you are aware of that, the process of surrender there goes very slow. Because the doer here is awake. Your ego is active here. In the process of Shaktipat, egotism is the realization that something is going inside, which cannot be stopped by any means, which cannot be even directed. That ego too has the realization that it is some inner power which is instrumental in all activities. Whether the mind agrees or disagrees, it starts getting ready for the process of surrender. And for this reason, in the tradition of Shaktipat, like intellectual, mental, and also the reasoning faculty, the process of surrender depends on the quantum of Shaktipat, and as this happens, the process of surrender starts automatically. Where the devotee is a doer, there the doer is subject. And because of this only, the intellect keeps on searching for proofs. And the ego is also not ready to accept that whatever is happening is generated by itself. It feels that it is being done by it. This is the difference between the energy and compassion-induced method and the method induced by ego.
During meditation, we effectively concentrate on a particular object. In the tradition of Shaktipat, it seems that in whatever activity the devotee is engaged, those very activities become object and the devotee concentrates only on activities. To what extent is this process right?
The realization which happens in Shaktipat is complete in itself. Shakti is awareness incarnate, bliss incarnate and performance incarnate. And because of its divine inherent qualities, it starts the purification of the body. Which activity is to be set in motion is decided by the Shakti and not by your mind, intellect or conscience. Here the mind, intellect and conscience has only one role left. That is only to witness. We can also, in other words, describe it as Sakshi Bhav. Since power has been activated, energies has been channelized, and in this activity, whatever mind, intellect and conscience is experiencing, none of these have the capacity to stop this motion of energy that is taking place. And here starts the process of surrendering. And gradually, the ego too dissolves into this process of surrendering. As the level of energy intensifies, the process of surrender also increases proportionately. Because of the impressions gained over previous births, our ego surfaces itself. Energy being the embodiment of knowledge, she knows pretty well how to nullify that ego. And by using the appropriate quantum in a very normal and easy way, it takes the devotee forward on the path of meditation.
What is the difference between meditation and retention?
Reaching the state of thoughtlessness is meditation, and way to reach the state of thoughtlessness is retention.
What else remains after reaching the state of thoughtlessness?
Once you reach the state of thoughtlessness, only you remain, and the rest comes to an end.
Who experiences the state of thoughtlessness?
The state of thoughtlessness is experienced by the self-illumined. The waves that emanate from this consciousness are your thoughts and also your values. They only are your will, your options. They are your ways of life. The greatest difficulty that a devotee has to experience when he steps into meditation, and at that time there is big onslaught on him of opinions, habits, mind, intellect and consciousness. Because you see, all these things are shattered, and in their self-defense, they react symbolically and become aggressive. In this situation, a devotee, whatever changes the flow of divine energy brings in his conscious, whatever change this divine energy brings in his body, he doesn't have to do anything but to witness it silently. And as the state of witnessing gets empowered, the intensity of surrender increases. And this is the only method in Shaktipat process which is quite aware of all your inner values. As this divine energy becomes more active, the state and intensity of meditation improves, and your mind, intellect and consciousness start to calm down gradually. As the process of settling down begins, the internal and external changes that take place at the very subtle level, mind, intellect and consciousness perceive them very easily. And it is here that subtlety of the devotee increases. And with this subtlety, the bliss you experience in your consciousness, and with that bliss, the devotion intensifies, and by the grace of divine energy, and by the grace of Guru Tattva, the devotee is overwhelmed. Therefore, this whole path is the path of surrender. When the internal awareness is energized, mind, intellect and consciousness become pacified. Calm mind, serene intellect and serene consciousness start getting concentrated itself. And this resoluteness becomes instrumental in finding you an entry to the gate of meditation.
What is the role of knowing in meditation?
The whole meditation is linked with knowing. Until your inner awareness is awakened, you will never ever experience meditation. In fact, knowing is the basic nature of your soul. The eternal bliss being the natural ingredient of that element. In all the three phases of time, to know your presence and to know others by knowing yourself and set yourself in your own blissful nature. These are the basic qualities of the soul and also the basic qualities of the divine energy. This is why Shiva and Parvati both experience their glory as a part of supreme power, Omkar. They both find a place there for themselves. Like in the morning we performed Kumkum Archana and the center of the Sri Yantra. This is the center point where Shiva and Shakti surrender themselves, submerge into each other, become one by assuming inseparable identity.
In the beginning of meditation, the concentration is on thoughts. It's only afterwards that its feeling remains. Guruji, kindly explain this process.
Whenever you close your eyes or you are in a solitary place, then you are conversant and aware with each thought. And as you start looking at them without getting yourself involved in a neutral way, the thoughts start calming down themselves gradually. Calming down of thoughts is the first sign of concentration of consciousness. As thoughts calm down, mind, intellect, and consciousness start calming down and proceed with firmness towards concentration. And the height of concentration is the chief aim of meditation. It is that highest state where you find yourself in a very thoughtless state. You are in the state of enlightenment, and in scriptures this is known as Turiya.
Can anyone meditate despite the presence of doubts?
Presence of doubts and apprehensions is the indication that the intellect is active. In meditation, intellect has no role to play.
Then one who is in the process of knowing, who is that?
One who is aware is himself awakened, and it does not need more or separate intellect. Our intellect is conditioned. It holds all the three attributes, and that who is to be known is beyond these attributes. And he is the one who is knowing mind, intellect, and consciousness. But I would like to say further that one who illuminates mind, intellect, and consciousness is your own true self. Without its light, mind, intellect, and consciousness cannot be illuminated. That is why mind, intellect, and consciousness don't illuminate you. So mind, intellect, and consciousness to illuminate the material world are the proper resources. They cannot illuminate yourself because they themselves get illuminated by others. And this is the limitation of your resources, and to get to know the limitations of these resources is meditation.
What is the obstruction between us and the cosmic Supreme Self?
The biggest obstacle between you and the universal enlightened self is ego. Your ego considers you as a body, whereas the cosmic self believes it to be enlightened self. It is not only a belief but a self-experience. The experience of your ego is that it is physical, is body. And therefore, your ego is body-centric. And this body-centric ego creates the biggest obstacle for you in the world. This is the bondage of mind, intellect, and consciousness. If you are free from this bondage, you always remain free, because these bondages do not affect the enlightened self. It is beyond them.
How can we be free while leading a practical life?
If you realize that you are free, then you are free while leading a practical life even. You work in some company and you go there at 10 in the morning and work sincerely there till 5 in the evening. You complete the work allocated to you by your superiors. You work more than your capability and impress the superiors of your company, and then you get promoted. Here you are with the profit or loss incurred by that company. You are not directly concerned with that profit or loss. And for this reason, as much as you do service without expectation or perform the duties of a household similarly, you do not become attached with the world or your family.
I am the one who creates the worldly attachments, and I am the one who wants deliverance from these. What explains this?
This world is self-evolving. It does not have a tendency to create any obstacle in itself. The more your mind, intellect and consciousness attach with it, the more you are in its bondage, more you get entangled. The more neutrally you perform the duties of a householder with the help of mind, intellect and consciousness, the more free you are from worldly affairs. Where there comes me and mine, where comes mine and ours, there exists the world. If you are beyond me and mine, you are beyond mine and ours, you are free.
Then what is mine in this world?
You yourself are the whole universe, therefore the world is also yours. Don't you ever try to organize this. Don't you ever try to dominate this as well. Where the desire to dominate starts, there begins your bondage. What you were some 4 years ago or till yesterday, you are not today. When we cannot be the master of our own self, how can we think of subjugating others? You have a wife, you have a son. They are completely independent in themselves. You cannot bring them under your dominance. If you accept them as they are, then your household is complete, unblemished, and full of bliss. Where your effort to prove your dominance begins, where you head towards acquisition, the chain of your grief and troubles starts. And these are the sorrows you get from the world.
Guruji, we have often seen this appear that when we hear the viewpoint of others, we like it and we are also convinced about it. But when it is time to act upon it, a potential fraud is seen in it. Is it not risky?
If one has got the capability to counter the potential frauds, then there are no difficulties. How much he can be awakened if he is better equipped to absorb the potential dangers than you, then he will not be awakened by you. One who can win by turning the table on failure, the failure loses its power to frighten him.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand.
I mean to say, those who have the capacity to take maximum risk and know its outcome as well. They know the result of this. They are aware of their abilities as well. Therefore, when somebody says that a particular person is taking a great risk, the amount of that big risk is so expressed is according to your understanding, your perception. It is very normal for the one who is taking the risk.
Neither have I seen God, nor have I experienced anything which comes close to God. So, while pursuing the path of meditation, I'm taking a great risk. I don't know what I'm up to.
It is like this when you are trying to understand yourself. You are not indulging in self-denial. And when you are not indulging in self-denial, you are taking risk. Who is proving your existence? Only you are proving it. Is it not a risk? And if you can take this much risk in establishing your identity, you can also establish the existence of God. हाफिज जालंधरी says, हर जर्रा चमकता है अनवारे इलाही से, हर सांस ये कहती है हम हैं तो खुदा भी है.